Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Woods, and I am the Director of Career Services at the School of Social Work. And I wanted to spend some time to talk to you about licensure. I will go over some information about basic licensure in different states and how to go about finding that information. I will explain how to apply for licensure in the state of Michigan, and I will describe a little bit of information about the exams so that you will be familiar with some of the resources out there that will help you with the preparing for the exams. If you have any questions after today's session, just let me know. I have my email address in the slides, and so you can contact me at any time regarding licensure questions or general career services questions. So let's get started. Okay, so that's my email address at the Career Services Office. It's ssw-cso@umich.edu. So contact me anytime regarding your questions. So what is licensure? Licensure is basically laws that govern. Let me minimize this a little bit so you can hopefully see. Okay. So licensure basically is state law. So each state, or we call jurisdiction, regulates the practice of social work, making sure that those who are practicing social work in a particular state have an educational background and the experience to do so. And that ensures that the public is not going to see someone who do not have that particular background. So each state has passed laws to regulate who can become a social worker and what type of practice in social work that you can perform regarding being licensed or not being licensed. Oops. I don't know why it went to that. So the difference between licensure credentials, out there, they're floating a lot of acronyms after professionals' names. So you will see a lot of different initials and acronyms. Each state does have particular license categories. And so you might see someone with an LMSW after their name or LCSW. Those are licensing credentials, and that is state law. So people who have the license credential can advertise that they do have that license so that people in the public will know that they are a licensed professional. The National Association of Social Workers has a credentialing system that started before licensure was enacted in every state. And so social workers could join the National Association of Social Workers and then go through the process of getting supervision and passing an exam that was created through the National Association of Social Workers to get an ACSW and become a member of the Academy of Certified Social Workers. That still is in existence today, even though each state has passed laws for licensure. You can elect to join NASW and also get a professional credential, such as the ACSW. So all the work that you're doing in a particular state to gain your license, you can submit that same paperwork as an NASW member and get that credential and have both a credential and a license in any state. So that is now optional because license regulate or social workers are regulated in each state, and that is the law. You do not have the option to not have a license and practice social work, especially with clinical and direct services. However, it is optional to get a credential. Many of our graduates do get credentials. and they have both a license and a credential through the National Association of Social Workers. I just wanted you to be familiar with the differences in those two things because I know that there's a lot of acronyms floating around and it can get kind of confusing. So just keep in mind that state law is not optional if you're practicing as a social worker, especially direct services and clinical work. NASW credentials are optional, so you can decide whether or not you want to join NASW and also get that particular type of credential. So there are some commonalities floating out there with licensure. So I'm going to try to minimize this floating view. Okay. So there's some commonalities out there with licensure because there is a model social work act that has been developed through the National Association of Social Workers. And I mean, not the national, the Association of Social Work Boards is a national organization, and they have a Model Social Work Act. And that Model Social Work Act, along with the National Association of Social Workers credentialing system, a lot of states use that information as baseline to create their licensing rules and the laws. So you will see if you look at different states' rules, there are some commonalities across boards because they use a lot of the different Models Act and NASW credentialing system to create basic information, basic laws regarding social work practice. So some of the commonalities out there that you will see is that is typical an application that you have to fill out in order to get a license. That application is created and implemented by state boards. So Michigan has a board of social work. They will create the all of the forms and implement the licensing laws in the state of Michigan. And then a lot of state boards will want confirmation that you have your master's degree in social work. So they want your final transcripts or a letter from our registrar's office indicating that you are due to graduate or you have graduated with an MSW. All states will have some type of background check to make sure that they're doing their due diligence in protecting the public. And so you may have to fill out some information about your just demographic information and about your history, and also submit for a background check. Most states have several levels or categories of licensure. They have one for those who recently graduated from an MSW program, and they typically have an advanced category for someone who has been practicing social work for at least 2 years. Some states have exams at the first level and the second level. So for recent graduates and for those who are practicing 2 years or more out, Michigan is one of those states that only has exams in order to progress to the second or advanced category. But there are some states like New York and Illinois and Ohio that have exams that you have to pass at each level. Every state has an exam that you have to pass in order to meet the advanced level of licensure. For instance, the LMSW requires exams in Michigan for you to obtain that category, and oftentimes states will have the LCSW licensed clinical social worker. You have to pass the clinical exam in order to get that license level. So every state has an exam that's required for the advanced level, and just keep in mind, depending on the state you go to, you may or may not have to take an exam to get your initial license. So some differences in licensure that are out there. There is unfortunately no consistency in titles across different states. So, because each state developed their own licensing laws, there were some commonalities in the requirements and some of the laws that were written, but some of the inconsistencies is what a state decided to call their category or level of license. So in Michigan, you'll find that our levels of licenses are called limited license, LLMSW, and full licensure, LMSW. But if you go to New York, the first level is the licensed social worker. Illinois, it's a licensed social worker. In the second level, it's a licensed clinical social worker. So you can see at Illinois and Michigan, although we have the same levels, we call them differently. The titles are called differently, and the acronyms that you'll see in social workers practicing in Michigan versus practicing in Illinois, you'll see the acronyms behind the social workers' names are different. So you want to keep that in mind, and you really must think about licensure state specific. Some states do require you to submit evidence that you have taken specific coursework while you were in the MSW program. And most of that is centered around clinical work. There are about 13 states out there or so who want specific coursework. Michigan does not. We just want your transcripts. But keep in mind that there are some states that will want you to list specific courses or submit course descriptions regarding the different mental health courses that you've taken in our program. Sometimes what differs are the supervision hours and who can supervise you. So most states will have a set amount of hours that you have to gain post MSW in order to progress from the initial license to the second category of licensure in that state. For instance, Michigan, we want 4,000 hours. There are other states that might want 3,000 or 3,200 hours. So the hours that you have to gain in order to progress from the initial license to the second license might vary. And some states will have specific information on who can supervise you for the purposes of licensure. In Michigan, we really want someone who has a full license and the same credential that you're seeking to supervise you. There are some states that will allow someone with a psychology degree, say a doctorate in psychology, to supervise you. Some like California, may say that some of your hours of supervision can be by someone who has a marriage and family therapist license. Some states want the person supervising you to have gone through specific training. In Michigan, we do not require licensed supervisors to have specific type of training, but there are other states that do require those folks to have training, and thus you have to go and get supervised by someone who have been approved by a state to provide supervision. Some states will ask for professional references on your behalf. Massachusetts is one of the states where they will ask you to submit professional references as a part of your application. So I get a lot of questions about whether or not macro social workers should get licensed. And just keep in mind, if you're a macro social worker, that most states do not license you as a macro social worker. So there are some states like Michigan that does have what they call an administrative or generalist track or macro track, and they will designate that. They'll say non-clinical or macro or administrative would be considered their macro kind of route as opposed to a clinical route. So what I tell students who are going to practice macro social worker is to really investigate whether or not the state that you want to practice in actually has a macro license or that type of designation that you can achieve. And if it does not, then you do not have to get licensed. If it does, then you can do like the clinical social workers, investigate what the norm is, fill out the forms, and proceed with being a licensed social worker in that particular jurisdiction or state. So reciprocity, unfortunately there is not reciprocity from one state to another. Reciprocity means that if you're licensed in one state, you're automatically licensed in another. And unfortunately, we do not have that across state lines. Because of COVID and teletherapy, there may be some changes in the future regarding that. But right now, what is happening is an endorsement process. So an endorsement means that if you are moving from state A to state B or want to get licensed in multiple states, you have to submit forms, and they're called endorsement forms that verify what you've done in state A. You'll submit those forms to state B. They will review them and then endorse your license in that state. Especially if state laws and regulations are similar, it's easier to get endorsed in multiple states or states that you're moving to. Sometimes you may come across a state that has slightly different rules, and you may have to submit additional paperwork or do some additional requirements in order to get an endorsement in that state. So I have identified kind of a quick checklist, really think about licensure and how to find out or list what the rules are regarding licensure in different states. So it's really important that you think about a jurisdiction or state that you want to practice in and list that jurisdiction or state. And then from there, you will research, and I'll show you how to do this. You will identify what the license categories or names are in that state. Once you have identified the license categories or names, then you will further do research to figure out what the requirements are to be licensed up under that category. And then once you look at the requirements are going to tell you what you need to do, what the requirements are for that license category. They'll also explain when you can apply for that license. So can you begin really early in your last semester, or are you going to have to kind of wait near the end of your last semester, begin the process, and then you can complete it when your final transcripts are ready? So some states will allow you to apply at different points in your last semester. And then you will look at the forms. All the forms are on each state's website. So there is not just one website that has all of the different forms listed. You really have to look at the jurisdiction and then figure out the requirements, and then the forms will be there for you to submit to that particular state or jurisdiction to get licensed. So that's a quick checklist. Keep that handy, and then that will help you sort out, especially if you're looking at multiple states, what the requirements are. You keep them separate. That way you don't get the information mixed up. The acronyms and the license categories, you don't get those mixed up. So I'm going to take you to this website. It's called the Association of Social Work Boards. I had mentioned earlier that the Association of Social Work Boards is a national organization. They create the exams that are used by all 50 states. They also have a wealth of information for state boards. So they have the Model Licensing Act that gives state boards basic information about licensing laws and regulations for just best practices. They have a wealth of information about the exam. Their website is where you would go to actually sign up for the exam and pay for the exam. They also have a wealth of information about license regulations in each state and links to the boards. So I'm going to go to that and show you. Going to Go to your Association of Social Work Board's website. Here it is right here. So the Association of Social Work Boards, this is their homepage. And right here on the left-hand side, it's exam candidates. That is where you would go to register for the exams, um, go through if you need any accommodations in order to take the exams. You could read what information is needed and how to go about asking and arranging accommodations. They have information about the exams in this website. This candidate handbook here is an excellent resource. It gives you information about what's on the exam. They also go over the piercing test sites. That's the test sites where the exams are administered, so that you have an idea of what to expect prior to exam day, and also what to expect when you go into a Pearson test site to actually take the exam. So I stress to everybody, read the candidate handbook as you get ready to prepare for the exam, to sign up for the exam. You can read it now, but it has a lot of good information that will reduce a lot of anxiety about what to expect. I know there's a lot of anxiety about the exams anyway, but as much information about what to expect in terms of the mechanics of the exam and actually taking the exam, the less anxiety you will have kind of overall. So that's a helpful section. For the purpose of licensure, this particular section is excellent here. So as I was talking about uh, finding out information about the rules and regulations in each state, you can do that by just clicking on this about license regulation here, and then you would go to social work regulation. And if you scroll down, it has a quick report here, and then it has auto jurisdiction. So if you wanted to look at some basic information with the license category and just basic requirements, you can create a chart. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to select Alabama and let me see. I'm going to select some of the ones that are kind of popular. California, Florida, and New York. And scroll down, and then you can generate a report. And then it gives you a nice, lovely chart here. So I can scroll down. Gives you this nice chart here that gives you the license category. So what the name of the license is, the license acronyms or the initials, what the basic education requirements are. It'll tell you how they advance, how many post supervision hours you need to advance to the second category, and what exams are required. So that gives you a basic overview, which is excellent to know about the license name and basic requirements in a particular state. So I'm going to click back to the home page. And then if you go into licensees again, over on the right-hand side, it says find a licensing board. If you click on that, so once you have the license categories and the basic information, you can go directly to that website of that state. So say I want to further research California. I click California. It takes you directly to a link to that board's website. And then that way you will find out. So LCSW, I'm an applicant, and I'm trying to get to the LCSW. So now I know what the acronym is for that state. Then I can go directly to that state to get further information, detailed information about the requirements, and then the forms that are needed for that particular state, and then proceed from there. So that is the easiest and the cleanest way to find out information about licensure in different jurisdictions. So let's go back to here. So that was that home page on that slide that I was talking about. And then I took you to get to that link, which is how to find out about the different licensing requirements in different jurisdictions. And then that was the link or the information to find the licensing board that I just described. So I'm going to talk about licensure in Michigan because most of you will stay here and become licensed here and practicing. So in Michigan, our Michigan Board of Social Work is housed in the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department. The Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department, LARA for short, oversees the licensing of a lot of professionals, from dentists to occupational therapists, social workers, a lot of other professions as well, like plumbers, a lot of different professionals. So they work with the Michigan Board to process your application and also to answer questions that you may have about licensure in Michigan. So in Michigan, we have two different levels for those who have MSWs. We have a limited license social work designation, and then we have full licensure, the LMSW. All graduates are only eligible for a limited license, and you work your way towards full licensure in Michigan. So you apply for your LMSW, and you can apply and begin this process before you actually graduate. You can apply and get your fingerprints done, and then preset Wolverine access to submit your transcripts when your MSW is completed. So your application, and I'm going to take you to the website in a minute. Let's see, let's try to do that actually now. Let me end the show here. This is the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs website. And this is we're housed up under the health professions. And you would click up under health professions and then go to the social work area. And here's the application right here to apply for the MSW and other types of licensing. So it's a fillable form, but you got to print it off and mail it in. So as I'm scrolling down, you would click this limited license and select either clinical or macro as your distinction. You cannot click both of them at the same time. You can only pursue one distinction. And so you will complete this form and then print it off and then submit a check or money order. Says made out to the state of Michigan. Do not send cash. And through snail mail, you'll have to mail this in with your check or money order to the address at the top. So you would submit this form to the address at the top with your check or money orders. I think it was $43.20 or something like that. And they will process this application and then send you back a customer service number and instructions to sign up for your fingerprint check through an approved vendor. And so they have suggested approved vendors and or other vendors that you can go get your fingerprints done. So you can submit this and get your application processed and go get your fingerprints done before you actually graduate. And I really advise you to do that now if you're graduating in August because of COVID. A lot of the state employees are working from home, so it's going to take them a little bit longer, maybe, to process your application. And also, fingerprint check, you have to make an appointment to go get your fingerprint check done. So once you get your approval for that by the state, recognizing that you've submitted an application, you have to make an appointment to get your fingerprints done. And I'm not sure how backed up because of COVID those different vendors are. So if you begin this process now, at least you'll have several weeks in your up under your belt before you actually graduate to get these things done, because the state needs the results of your fingerprint check in order to approve you for the LLMSW. Okay. And then I'm going to show you Wolverine Access, how to preset and request your transcripts. You can do that as well now. So if you go to Wolverine Access and click on student and then student business, it asks you for your unique name and password. Here. And then you go to academic records, and then you can order your transcripts right here. If you scroll down, you can say process after your degree is recorded for summer. So if you're graduating, you can preset Wolverine Access to process after your degree is granted. You want an electronic transcript, and you want your undergrad and grad, or it says undergrad and grad. So you would select that, and then you would put in the email address from the application. It says to a third party, and then you would type in the email address from the application. So the application has the email address right here. So that right here, oops. So that you would type in that spot, and then that will preset Wolverine Access to automatically generate your transcripts, and then you're good to go. So once Laura has all three of those things, your application, the results of your fingerprint check, and your final transcript, you have a valid limited license, and that is renewed up to 6 times or every year until you accumulate all your hours and pass the exam. And right now, you can take the exam and as you're gaining your hours to progress to full licensure anytime while you're gaining your post-MSW hours. That rule is going to change June 30th of 2021, I'm sorry. So June 21, at the end of June of next year, you will have to accumulate all of your hours in order and submit that information in order to take the exam. Right now, you can elect to take the exam while you are accumulating your hours. So a lot of people are doing that. And so you have plenty of time to sign up for the exam once you're approved as an LLMSW. And you can only sit for the exam once your LLMSW has been approved. And the only kind of training that licensed social workers, LLMSWs, and LMSWs must do is training on human trafficking. And there is no, I guess there's basic knowledge that you have to gain, but you have a lot of variety of different options to gain that different training. So you can research about human trafficking in your classes and submit a research paper and then keep note of that type of research, and you've had that training. You can go to a workshop, you can go to a conference, it can be online. So the state is not very strict on how you obtain that information. You just have to be able to document that you have done it. Um, so there's a lot of options there for that particular type of requirement. So once you have your LLMSW, then you have to gain 4,000 hours of post MSW experience in order to progress to full licensure. 4,000 hours is typically 40 hours a week over 2 years. So most are obtaining full licensure a little bit over 2 years after they have their LLMSW. So you have to get 100 hours of supervision. So 100 hours of supervision is 1 hour a week. So for every 40 hours that you're working, you're getting 1 hour supervision. And if you're working over 2 years, that's about 100 hours because it's 52 weeks in a year. And with supervision, your supervisor can meet with you as a group. So they can do that at least twice a month. The other 2 hours must be an individual review with each person that they're supervising. And then if you are trying to get the clinical distinction, you must pass the Association of Social Work Board's clinical exam. If you are trying to get the macro distinction, you must pass the advanced generalist exam. And as noted, you're eligible to take the exam only after you have your LLMSW. So you cannot take the exam while you are applying for your LLMSW. So as soon as you get that credential or license, then you can go to the Association of Social Work Board's website and sign up for the exam. And typically when you sign up for the exam, you pick your test date, you pick your jurisdiction that you want your score sent to, that would be the state of Michigan. You pick your test date, and you pick the location of the Pearson test site that you want. And the only thing that COVID has affected in terms of test sites is the availability of a site that may be close to you, depending on what date that you want to take it. So some people have had to drive a little further if they want to only take the test on a specific date. And that's because of social distancing. They can't accommodate as many people in the test site as they used to. So that's the only thing that's affected the test sites now due to COVID. So if you want more variety or an option for closer test site, then you may have to pick a test date that's further in the future. So just keep that in mind when trying to sign up to take the test. Once you gain full licensure in one distinction, you can add another one. That comes with passing another exam. So the other exam that's required for that distinction, and gaining the 2,000 hours and 50 hours of supervision. So that's usually another year of work and passing another exam. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the exams. The exams are created through the Association of Social Work Boards. There are 3 of them that they create for different states to use. And so there's the master's exam that's often utilized in states where they want someone who is newly licensed to pass an exam. That's the master's exam. And then there's the advanced generalist and the clinical exam that's typically utilized at the 2-year mark. And as I say, in Michigan, you do not have to wait until the 2-year mark to take those exams. But that rule is going to change next year in June. but the advanced generalist and the clinical are also created through the Association of Social Work Boards. These exams are broad, general exams. They're not state specific, so they're not tailored to social work practice in Michigan or social work practice in New York. They're used by all different states depending on the license level. And you may take the same exam that someone in Illinois is taking. So I want you to be to know that it's not state specific. And if you pass, say, the clinical exam for the clinical distinction in Michigan and you move to Illinois, you have your exam scores, passing scores sent to Illinois because you've taken the exam that's required at that license level, and it's the same exam. And so you don't have to take another exam if you move from it to a different state for the same license level. The exam structure for all those three exams are the same. They're all computerized exam. When you sit for the exam, you'll get 4 hours to take the exam. You get 170 multiple choice questions. However, 20 questions don't count. They're pre-test type of questions that they're trying to create validity with. But you do not know what those questions are designated. So you should try to answer all 170 questions and try to get as many of the 170 questions right, because 20 of the questions get thrown out, but you don't know which 20 questions those are. And so you scored on 150 questions, and you typically have to get about 75%. So if you pass in one state, you pass in another. So making arrangements, you want to make sure that you're taking the correct exam for the license level that you're trying to obtain. You also want to make sure that you are taking the exam in the right time. And certainly the Association of Social Work Board is the website where you register and find out a lot of information about the exam. This is just basic information to get you ready to take the exam. It's test sites. So you want to make sure when you arrive that you arrive early, make sure you know how to get there, where to park. You have to bring your ID. It's proctored. They do make special accommodations. Sometimes they will scan your palm or something if you need to go to the restroom and come back to make sure that someone else isn't coming into the center on your behalf. There's a lot of security regarding taking the test. And so that's described in that candidate handbook that I talked about earlier. So review that so you know what special accommodations might be made for you, and you know what to expect when you show up on test day, and you know what to bring so that there's no issue with you sitting down and taking the test. This is some basic information, categories about the exams that I want you to be familiar with. There's more detail on the Association of Social Work Board's website, but these are basic categories, or main categories that's on the exam. And you'll see that there's a lot of overlapping categories. All three of these exams have ethics on it. So you want to be familiar with the Code of Ethics and Ethical Dilemmas. They all have human diversity, human development, diversity in behavior and environment. So social work practice across the lifespan, basic human development, they all have that on it. They all have basic assessment and intervention at client systems. So you'll see advanced generalist has more intervention in the macro level. The master's exam has across the board, and then the clinical exam just has a little bit of more case vignettes that involve more psychotherapy and more advanced clinical practice. But when you look at all three of these, you'll find that there are overlapping. Three out of the four categories are really overlapping. Um, so when you take the test, you will get your score right away. They'll ask you to fill out a short survey, and then you'll know whether or not you passed. Our particular school, we have a really good pass rate. It's about between 82 and 85%, depending on the year, and that has been historically the last 4 or 5 years. And then it's even higher for the if you're taking the master's exam. So we have a pretty good pass rate, and a lot of the courses that you have taken are actually really good um, foundation for a lot of the what's on the exam. The only thing that sometimes trip people up is just picking out the best answer out of the multiple choice answer, kind of thinking multiple choice question, thinking too hard on the question, changing their first initial response. And then sometimes there's a little bit more abuse and neglect type questions on the exam. So really kind of looking at abuse and neglect issues regarding children and abuse and neglect issues regarding adults, substance abuse and substance use type questions, and medication. So if you haven't had a lot of that, because the DSM is on the exams as well, if you not haven't had a lot of that, you'll want to go and maybe prep you. But you get your score right away, and if you need to retake it, and most of you will not have to retake it. I think you'll do well on the exam. Then you have to wait 90 days, and you have to pay again. So that's the other thing with wanting to study and prep for the exam. Most people take about 2 to 3 months of prep time. So they're working and they're just studying in the evening, a little bit at a time, just prepping up until test day. And there are some of our alum who will meet together in groups and help each other out with cue cards and all of that, and prepping for the exam. We do have some materials and resources in the Career Services Office to help you with the exam. So we have some study guides that are created. We have the Association of Social Work Boards has an online guide that they provided the school. So I have that. Academic Review and LEAP Licensing Exam Preparation Services. There are two independent test prep services. So we have their study guides. We have a practice test that you can take, and right now LEAP is allowing us to administer that practice test online, so I can give you a sign in, and you can take it from your home. And then there are smartphone applications, and then if you prefer to have more in-person instruction and prep for the exam, there are some options for you. The National Association of Social Workers has an in-person prep course. Our prep course is online and is self-paced, so that's a little different, but it does cost money to take that online course. So this is just other services that our office provides, but certainly if you have any questions after today's session, just email me, and I will set up an appointment or email you back, and we can go from there. I hope this was very helpful to you all. I know I probably rushed through some of this, and I know that the licensing process can be a little bit hard to flesh out. But if you kind of take it slow and go by that checklist that I talked about earlier, that'll make it a lot easier. I want to show you another thing that I didn't get a chance to talk about. On our School of Social Work website, I did create up under licensing and exam prep Here it says some basic information about what is licensure, a link to the Association of Social Work Boards. Also here created a list too of the different license levels. Not all of the requirements. It just has the state, the different license level, if there's specific coursework that needs to be completed or verified for that state. So that's just basic information that every school now has to provide students. And so we created that for you as well as a resource. And I'll talk about licensure in Michigan on that site too. So that's another resource out there for you to kind of get at the different levels. And it has a link to each state's page, just like the Association of Social Work Boards had a link to every licensing board. So I hope this information was helpful, and I wish you all well in the future, and take care and be safe.